You're not crazy. You're not too sensitive. You're not the problem. What you survived was real, and it has a name. Welcome to Fuck You, Narcissist, the podcast where we speak the truth that nobody told you, backed by science, rooted in story, and driven by one mission: to heal the people this epidemic has quietly been destroying. I'm your host, Tracey Lynch, author, founder, and a woman who lived it, survived it, and refuses to be silent about it. I work to save the lives of women being quietly erased. Every week we go deep, we go raw, we go scientific, because around here we operate on one principle. The whole point is to take the energy you've pointed their way and use it to heal yourself. And to do that, we need to deal with facts, not feelings. Let's get into it. I want you to think for a moment about the person who hurt you the most. And I want you to ask yourself the question that has probably kept you awake for years, the question that has no good answer, and that everyone in your life has tried to talk you out of asking. How did they get this way? Today we go there carefully with science, because understanding how does not mean excusing what. Every single person who has been on the receiving end of narcissist abuse asks this question, usually in the middle of the night, usually after years of trying to make sense of someone whose behavior simply will not metabolize into any framework you recognize. Were they born this way? Did I do this? Did their childhood do this? Did the world do this? Today, we are going to answer all four of those questions with what the research actually says. And then I am going to tell you something that will either set you free or make you furious, depending on where you are in your healing journey, probably both. Because here is the truth that the research keeps confirming. There is no single answer. There is no clean story. There is no one thing that you did or did not do that produced this. Narcissism is the real result of convergence, genes, attachment, environment, and culture. And the convergence happens in a window of time that closed long before you were even paying attention. Facts, not feelings. Let's start with what the science is most certain about. Narcissistic traits, like every other personality structure, have a heritable component. A landmark 2014 twin study published in the Journal of Personality Disorders examined hundreds of identical and fraternal twin pairs and found that grandiose narcissism showed a heritability estimate of roughly 50 to 60%. Vulnerable narcissism, the more covert, hypersensitive form, showed a similar range. That is in the same neighborhood as heritability estimates for extroversion, conscientiousness, and intelligence. Translation: somewhere between half and 2/3 of what we are talking about is hardwired into the person before the world even touches them. I need you to hear that, because if you have been holding a private list of every parenting decision you ever made, every yes, every no, every too much, every not enough, and you have been ranking yourself against that list at 2 a.m. for years, I need you to let some of that weight go. You did not invent this person. You did not write the genetic code. You did not engineer the wiring. You loved a wiring that was always going to be difficult, and the wiring was not your fault. On top of the genetic floor, there's an attachment floor, and here the research gets more interesting and even more painful. John Bowlby, in his foundational work on attachment theory, identified that the first 2 to 3 years of life are when the human nervous system learns what relationships are for. Are caregivers responsive? Are they consistent? Are they safe? Is the world a place where my needs will be met if I express them? Mary Ainsworth refined this with her famous strange situation studies, identifying 4 primary attachment styles: secure, anxious, avoidant, and disorganized. Decades of follow-up research have found that early attachment patterns predict adult relational behavior with stunning consistency. Narcissistic personality structures correlate most strongly with 2 early attachment patterns. The first is what attachment researchers call cold, inconsistent over-evaluation. Overvaluation. A parent who alternates between dismissive neglect and inflated performance based praise. The child learns, I am only loved when I am exceptional, and I am only exceptional when I perform. The second is overindulgence without limits. With Dr. Bruce Bredehoft of Concordia University, who has spent over 20 years studying childhood overindulgence, calls a pattern of giving children too much, too soon, too often, with no developmental skill building underneath it. His research finds that adult children of overindulgence show elevated rates of entitlement, materialism, and difficulty with delayed gratification, the soil narcissism grows in. Notice that both patterns produce a similar result. A child who is given everything but security. A child who is taught that their worth lives in the performance, not the person. Why good parents produce narcissists? Here is the part that will be hard to hear and that I will not soften. Good parents, devoted, attentive, deeply loving parents produce narcissistic children all the time. Not because they failed, because the wiring was always there. The cultural soil was rich, and the world reinforced behaviors that the home tried to correct. The narrative that estrangement is always a parent's fault, that there must be some hidden abuse, some unaddressed wound, some failure of attunement at the bottom of every cutoff, is one of the most damaging public health narratives of our era. Carrie Pellimer, the Cornell sociologist whose work we will go deeper into in episode 14, has documented in 2 large national surveys that estrangement happens across the full spectrum of family histories, including in families where the parents did, by every measure available, an extraordinary job. I say this not to absolve every parent. There are abusive parents in the world, and that is a different conversation we will have in due course. I say it because the audience for this podcast includes hundreds of thousands of parents who are absolutely shredded by self-blame, and the science does not support the level of self-blame they are carrying. You can be a good mother and have a narcissistic child. You can be a good father and have a narcissistic child. The data is not equivocal on this. The data is clear. The cultural accelerant. And then there is the culture, because we live in a moment that, by every available measure, accelerating the conditions under which narcissistic traits develop and flourish. In 2010, the psychologists Jean Twenge and W. Keith Campbell published The Narcissism Epidemic, drawing on 3 decades of data showing that scores on the Narcissistic Personality Inventory among American college students had risen significantly between 1982 and 2006. The rise has not stopped. Subsequent research through the 2020s has found continuing elevation in entitlement scores, declining empathy scores, and increasing self-focused behavior across age cohorts. We will spend a full episode on the role of social media in episode 12, but for now, hold this. The cultural conditions surrounding the child you raised, the constant comparison, the algorithmic reward of self-promotion, the social pressure to perform a curated identity, the steady erosion of community and ritual, all of that was running alongside whatever you were doing at home. And the cultural signal was, in many cases, the louder one. You were not the only voice in their head. You may not have been the loudest. Trauma, enabling, and the tangle. I want to name one more piece of the etiology because it is the one that most frequently gets misused against parents. Some narcissistic personality structures do emerge from early trauma, specifically from the kind of trauma that requires a child to perform stability they do not have, suppress emotions they cannot process, and become an object, a smaller, controllable, manageable version of themselves in order to survive a chaotic environment. This is well documented in the developmental trauma literature, particularly in the work of Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, Dr. Pat Ogden, and Dr. Bruce Perry. What the literature does not say is that every narcissist had this kind of childhood. And what the literature absolutely does not say to you, the listener trying to figure out what happened in your family, are responsible for trauma in the world conflicted on a child who was already arriving with a particular nervous system in a particular cultural moment with 1,000 inputs you did not control. The tangle is real. The blame is misplaced. Knowing how a narcissist got this way does not undo what they did to you. It does not change the pattern. It does not produce reconciliation. It does not heal your heart. What it does do, and this is why I built this episode the way I built it, is to take the secret list you have been carrying, the one with every parenting decision on it, every yes and every no, every time you wonder if you should have intervened harder, loved softer, given less, given more, and it lets you put that list down. You did not engineer this. You did not invent this. You inherited a wiring, a culture, and a moment in history that conspired to produce something you could not have prevented. Your job was not to prevent who they would become. Your job was to love them. And you did. Before I let you go, there was a book that came out of these conversations. It is called Fuck You, Narcissist. I wrote it because I lost my sister, and I was not going to lose another woman to silence if I could help it. Every episode of this podcast is a chapter the book either contains or expands on. It is on Amazon. It is at TraceyLynch.com. And if you have gotten this far in this episode, you already know if it is for you. And if you want one good thing in your inbox every Sunday morning, the Sunday Reset is at TraceyLynch.com. No drama, no selling, just something to land on. Next week, episode 10, The Flying Monkeys, how narcissists recruit your entire world against you, with citations. If no one has told you today, you matter. You are not what they said you were. Your grief is not weakness. It is evidence of your love. You survived a hurricane with a smile on its face, and you are still here. If this episode hit you in the chest, share it. Someone in your world is drowning, and they don't even know it yet. They need this. Give it to them. Subscribe, leave a review, and come find me at TraceyLynch.com, because healing is not a solo sport. I'm Tracey Lynch, and this has been Fuck You, Narcissist. Facts, not feelings. Until next time.